Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I am here with a video where I would like to talk about my card of the year, my word of the year that I've chosen and why I've chosen it, and a sigil that I've made to represent it for myself. I had planned to make this video and post it, in very, very early January, like January 1st or 2nd, but, it ended up being a bit of a chaotic time, and frankly I've been pretty low energy and struggling with getting things done in the timelines that I had hoped to for the past little while. So I think better late than never, or maybe it just comes at the right time, who knows. Anyway, I've been enjoying watching other folks make videos around things like depth years and resolutions and word of the year and things like this, so I wanted to make one as well. The word of the year, choosing a word to focus on for the year, as well as calculating a card of the year, are something that I've done for a number of years now. The sigil part is new because I just finished reading fairly recently Laura Tempest Zakharov's book, Sigil Witchery, and I have a review of that book on my channel from a couple of videos ago, so I've been inspired by that to make a sigil to represent my word of the year and what I hope to explore there. So I think maybe what I will do is start with my card of the year, because the card of the year is something that I calculate, based on a numerical calculation. So it's not something that I, choose per se. And then go to the word, because the word is something that I do choose that is in part informed by the card of the year. And then go to the sigil last, since that represents the word, if that makes sense. So kind of the order in which these things have been chosen for me, I guess. So my card of the year, I calculate based on a formula that I'm sure many folks are familiar with. If I can find a good explanation online for how to calculate a card of the year, I'll put it in the description box below. But essentially, you take the digits that comprise the year, so 2021, and then add to that the digits that represent your birth month and birth date, so like the day of the month 1 to 31. And you add them all together and you reduce down, adding the digits together until you get to a number 22 or fewer. And 22 represents the Fool, because obviously you can't add things to get a 0, and that indicates the card of the year. Now, of course, it does mean that the card of the year kind of follows the trajectory of the major arcana, right? Because each year, the calendar year will be one number higher, 2020 to 2021, so it'll be one card further into the major arcana than it was last year, which means that for me, since last year I worked with the Hanged Man, that this year my card of the year is the Death card. And this is the Death card from the Nomad Tarot by Jennifer Drantel. And I like this Death card quite a lot. It has, of course, a skeleton there, which is present in a lot of Death cards, and a symbol that would come to mind quite readily for death. The butterfly there reminds me of a lot of folks use the keyword transformation to think about the Death card, and a butterfly is a good, I think, symbol of transformation, with the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, of course. And then it has mushrooms, which I'm very mushroom averse because I'm allergic, but I do think that mushrooms are a really good symbol to go on a Death card because of the function that fungi perform, breaking down, dead trees and things like this into forest floors so that new things can grow, right? So thinking about that, clearing out and making space for new things to flourish, that can be a part of this card. And this is also a deck that I want to work with more this year, and it feels quite wintry to me, so that's the one that I chose to show here. And death is an interesting one. I'm going to be thinking about this card over the course of the year. So I've tried to not, I never tried to kind of go into the year for the card of the year with too much of a preset, interpretation of what that is. And I don't think of this in a kind of divinatory sense of the death card, meaning that I'm going to have any particular thing happen this year or a particular thing happen to me this year necessarily. Not at all. I don't view the card of the year in a predictive way so much as I do in a companion to walk with and work with over the course of the year and to explore what the death card means to me. And to a slightly less extent, I also think about whatever the other card in the major arcana that adds up the same way is. So for the death card, since it's a 13, 1 plus 3 is 4. So that means there's also, for me this year, kind of quieter resonances of the Emperor as well, which is interesting. And you think about kind of the interplay between structure and stability and dramatic change and everything, everything shifting and falling apart. And I also have been thinking about the death card, of course, in relation to the Hanged Man, since that was the card last year. I think about the Hanged Man in terms of, getting a new perspective on things, right? Turning upside down and seeing the world in a new way. And with that, seeing in a new way, being able to acknowledge when one was wrong or embrace seeing things in a different way than one saw them before, right? And then, death, this is a transformational, dramatic card of death coming after that. What happens to those old ways of seeing, right, is something that I've been thinking about with this card for sure. And so something I've also been thinking about in terms of the death card as I was coming up with a word for the year was, thinking about how I navigate and can better navigate these kinds of massive changes that can be indicated by this card, and how I can work to position myself to navigate those major changes and major moments in a better way. And then, with the undertone of the Emperor there as the other card that adds up to 4, thinking about the kinds of structures or routines or approaches that are things that I can build into my life that facilitate navigating these kinds of moments in a good way, right? And so thinking about that, the word that I've chosen as my word to focus on for the year in 2021 is the word rhythm. And so for some backdrop on this, I've done a word of the year for the past couple of years. Last year, the word of the year that I chose was integration. And with integration, I was really thinking about trying to work against a tendency to compartmentalize that I have come to understand is not always helpful for me and is not always beneficial for me. Sometimes compartmentalizing can be great, but not always in the ways that I was and tend to engage in that. So that's what I was thinking about when it came to integration and thinking about that with the Hanged Man. And then the year before that, my word of the year had been resilience. And that year, resilience was kind of chosen because I think I was in a bit of emergency mode that year. I had been in a car accident, and I was having really disruptive panic attacks and anxiety to the point of, nearly not being able to work, not being able to commute to work specifically, because I commute on a highway. And so resilience was really building up, resilience, exactly what it sounds like, right? In a context of feeling like I didn't have much of that, and so that was what I was doing there. And so thinking about rhythm, I'm thinking about that in a way that is continuous from some of the things that I was thinking about with integration last year, and particularly resilience the year before, and thinking about how I can position myself in a good way to deal with moments and instances and occurrences that are tremendously disruptive and difficult, like what I was trying to do in the resilience context. But this year I feel like I'm doing that in from less of a place of real panic, right? Which is good. So trying to think about ways to not be so extremely thrown off by things, if that makes sense. And something that I've been observing and working on through, resilience year and integration year is my tendency with things like self-care and the ways that I take care of myself in order to empower me to contribute to my community and empower me to live in the ways that I want to, that I can really go to extremes in terms of being, quite good at taking care of myself at some points. And then when these kind of disruptive moments hit, everything just kind of falls apart. Like all the coping strategies and, things that I've, learned in therapy and all of these things just get abandoned by the wayside in the times that I need them most. And no matter how much I can identify that as a problem, I still fall into that. And so thinking about rhythm then this year, I'm thinking about, on the one hand, building good rhythms into my my practices, the practices that support me and keep me going and keep me well. Building those rhythms in good ways, thinking about what do I really need in something like a daily practice versus something in perhaps a monthly or moon phase frequency practice versus something that I want to maybe be doing over the course of the entire year. So insofar as I've been thinking about things like resolutions, that's how I've been thinking, what do I want to be really routine as a kind of anchor point, that's something that's there for me every day. What do I not actually need to be that, right? And then thinking about internal rhythms as well, being mindful of my own, the rhythms of the body and mental processes and things like this, and also attuning to the rhythms of my surroundings at the same time. So my environment, the seasons, the actions of the non-human animals that I share my immediate environment with, things like this, right? So thinking about aligning these kinds of rhythms as opposed to kind of struggling against the rhythms that I experience in my world, right? So that's kind of where I'm thinking in terms of rhythm, and it's not ever a word that has been on my radar as a word that I would pick as a word of the year, but it just kind of hit me at a moment that it stuck out as the word that I needed. And that's usually how I come to these words is, something will stand out as what I need to be thinking about and working with and journaling about over the course of a year. And so that's how rhythm kind of came about. And so thinking about, I don't even want to call them like resolutions per se, but thinking about plans, visions for the year, thinking about rhythm, I want to think about, again, daily practices that I would like to cultivate versus less frequent practices that I would like to cultivate and how those fit together. And in particular, can keep me a bit more constant and can make sure that the the skills and the strategies that I've picked up, particularly thinking about things that I've picked up in contexts like counseling for very severe anxiety and panic attacks, to keep those things managed as much as they can be, and making more constancy and consistency in that, as opposed to doing those things really well sometimes at the times when I perhaps least need them, and then having them fall by the wayside when I really do. So that's what I've been thinking. So as of now, I do want to maintain actually a daily tarot practice, a card of the day, cards of the day sometimes, oracle card of the day. I'm not holding myself to anything too specific here, because again, I'm not thinking about it as a resolution that's like either I succeed in doing it or I fail in doing it, but thinking of it as something that is supportive, right? In terms of just daily making sure that I take that little moment to do a little bit of deep breathing, maybe do a little bit of writing, look outside and spend some time with the weather and the environment. That is something that I need, that daily kind of self-check-in, because when things, particularly when I have a job, or I have jobs, multiple, that have extraordinarily busy periods, and then other periods that are very, very quiet. And I know I'm like far from unique in that, but I want to have, in terms of a daily practice, something that is small enough that I can feasibly maintain it, even when I feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants trying to get a ton of work done. Because in those really busy times, I tend to neglect myself and not take that time for myself. So I want to make a point of doing that. I also want to, and perhaps this is more resolution-like actually, I want to spend half an hour a day, if I can, trying to focus on and think in my second language, which is French, so that I don't neglect that. And I've been doing that actually for about half a year so far. So that's something I want to keep up. And then in terms of thinking about the rhythms of the environment, right, and what those mean for me, I want to this year, in a more deliberate way than I have previously, because this is something I've done before, is to think about the solstices and equinoxes and cross quarters when they come around, and spend some time thinking about what my associations for those times are, how I experience those times, what the environment around me is doing at those times. Because of course, we're all familiar with the Wheel of the Year and the names of Sabbats and things like this. But of course, inevitably, these times of year look very different depending on where you are, right? They emerge out of a particular historical and cultural context, a geographic context and climate context, right? That is clearly anything but universal, right? And so I want to spend some real time thinking about that this year and doing some writing about that. What does it mean for me that, for me, May 1st is always going to be May Day, right? It's the day of radical labor, for example, as one of those points that's on the Wheel of the Year, right? What does that mean, from more of a Wheel of the Year kind of perspective? Things like this, I'm interested in looking at. And then in between the over the year and the daily, I'm thinking about things like a bit more extended self-check-ins on times like new and full moons, and following some astrological transits and things like this is a constant. This is part of study as well, learning about astrology. So that's what I'm thinking about in terms of rhythm. So I've made a sigil this year to go with rhythm, and this is new. So normally what I would do with a word of the year is I would write it in places that I would see it regularly, maybe in a fancy script, with a nice pen. So places like the table where I do my card readings, in my office where I do most of my work at home, beside my computer so that I can see it there, and so on. So, and then I have this kind of reminder, and I'm thinking about what that means for me and what I would like that to mean for me and what that word can teach me over the course of the year. So this year, instead of just writing a word, I thought I would come up with a sigil since I just, had read this book. So the sigil that I came up with, I'll show you for rhythm. And again, I've said before, I'm not a good drawer of anything. So please don't judge my crooked. I'm going to try to draw a better one. This is just one that's on a piece of paper for the sake of showing you all what I've come up with. But I thought that I would explain it anyway, because this also gives some insight into the sigil crafting method that Laura Tempest Zakroff shares in her book. So this is my sigil for rhythm. And so the way that the book works, the Sigil Witchery book works, is that you start to come up with symbols that you want to incorporate into your sigil, or representations of particular concepts that you want the sigil to hold, right? And then you incorporate these into one image like this. And so the things that I had incorporated here, I started with this piece in the middle that is to represent a heartbeat. I know that that's not actually like a correct representation of a heartbeat, but it is something that will conjure that up for me when I see it. So that's what I started with. And I knew that I wanted to have representations of the elements in my sigil, because when I'm thinking about things like the rhythms of nature or cycles of nature, that's something that's important to me. And then the pieces on the inside, I was thinking about also in terms of rhythms of the seasons and cycles and things like this, the sun and the moon. So the circle in the center is a full moon. And then I also have 12 rays around the edge, which make it also represent the sun, and also the 12 rays to represent 12 months of the year, since I do have some things that I would like to work on in a kind of monthly way. So that's what I'm thinking about. That's my rhythm sigil. And what I'm going to do in terms of working with this and activating this and bringing it to my attention, in Sigil Witchery, Laura Tempest Zakroff talks about how effective it can be to have a sigil that's just, in your line of vision, but not necessarily of focus. And it kind of then is in your mind in this, not subliminal. Subliminal always sounds creepy to me, but it's getting in there without necessarily having to be constantly like focusing and looking straight at it, right? And she said, talking about subliminal, she says, so many forms of advertising that are so effective work in this way, right? So something is kind of there off, in the corner, and you don't necessarily register that it's there at the time, but it's in your mind. So I've been thinking about that and putting this in places where I would normally put my word of the year, and in particular in my day planner. I use a paper day planner that I'm very dependent on for keeping appointments. And last year, something I did with the integration year, I used to have a day planner that was the day planner for work, and then also have something akin to a day planner where I would record daily draws and card daily-ish tarot draws and things like this, and another spot where I would be doing some journaling about the seasons and things like this. And part of the integration year last year was putting that all into one place, right? So now my any notes about the astrological transits or the moon phases and lunations or cards I've drawn on a particular day and so on now are all in the day planner that is also the day planner that I use for work. So this is going to be a figure prominently in the front of that as well. And I think that this will be a really nice change from just having, a word written in text. So this is a way that I'll be working with one sigil through the course of the whole year. For rhythm, as I navigate thinking about and learning with the death card over the course of 2021. So that's my word, sigil, and card of the year. Thank you so much for watching. If you have chosen the word for your year, that you would like to share, or if you've calculated your card of the year that you want to work with in a particular way, and so on, please do share in the comments. I would love to hear and to chat with you. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.